Hello and welcome back, most illustrious members of the detail. I'm your host D, also known as MTF Doom, and today we're going to talk about the ways in which I was wrong about Nebula, the decks that she actually goes in, and some announcements. I hope you enjoy. Before we get into it, this goes along with the announcements. Please subscribe if you find my content elucidating, enlightening, or enriching, or my voice relaxing, or I've found that my giggle endearing. Whatever it is, by all please, subscribe. Join the Discord. That's the big one. That's the announcement. That's what we're doing. We just finished the first annual Fight to the Doom tournament in Discord. We have tomorrow's video probably will be coverage of the final rounds. It's super cool. The winner is already announced on Discord, so if you join now, you will be spoiling yourself, but you should do it anyway. And that's it. And it helps me, as always, it helps me reach new audiences and meet new people, because I do this not so much for the discrete number which my subscriber count is at, but for what it represents about the types of people I get to meet and interact with and have really cool conversations with, and I appreciate that aspect of this so much. That's what I'm doing it for. So even a comment down below if you have something interesting to add to the conversation. I love to hear it. So Nebula, I have been playing some Nebula. I didn't want to rush this video out. Usually I try to do like same day kind of content. I wanted to give this one a couple of days because there was some disagreement about my last two videos on season pass cards on Nimrod and Hitmonkey, and I think some of it was just people misunderstanding what I was getting at. So I'm not even making this like a what was the Nimrod one called? Nimrod is the best season pass card and it's not even close. It was clickbait. Whatever. You got to play the game a little bit. I'm not going to name this one. I'll make the thumbnail sexy, I think. That's how we'll get you. The point is, Nebula is not the best season pass card. Not even for the reasons you might not think like Nimrod was. Nebula is not good like Hitmonkey, where she kind of makes maybe not a whole new deck. Like the Miracle deck was always a thing. Hitmonkey slotted in to a lot of discrete decks. We'll start there. Hitmonkey kind of created its own deck, kind of, but what it really did in a lot of ways was made a lot of decks that were pretty good, very good, but didn't go in other decks at all, right? You can't just play Hitmonkey. I was looking at Nebula through the same lens, and I'll say Nimrod did the same, but just wasn't as good, right? Like, Nimrod was a card that theoretically made its own deck and made other Destroy decks better, but in practice doesn't really do what like it just doesn't do enough, so it doesn't get played a lot. So I was looking at Nebula through that lens of like, okay, which decks is Nebula going to bring from like mid to higher tier, like maybe even tier 1 or 2. And that's what the last video I released was my pitch for which decks that would be. The reality is Nebula is just Sunspot. There's a looming problem that I'm gonna soul call right now. Is when everyone gets their free Kitty Pride, and then you get Sunspot for free. Well, Sunspot's an early pool card, and then everyone has access to Nebula via the Battle Pass, right? Like everyone who, again, wants to spend the $10 that this game really does cost you to play in a lot of ways. We are going to have an embarrassment of riches in the 1-drop slot that's going to cause all kinds of issues because it's like cyclical. We had this problem earlier where like 6-drops weren't doing enough. Like you really start to feel it at like the end of pool 2 and getting into pool 3 before you have like ways to cheat 6-drops out. And then they like kind of made 6-drops better functionally through the Sandman stuff, through different like micro tunings, like the slight nerf to Sunspot. So like 6 costs are now there's now more counterplay to the types of decks that want to flood on 6 versus playing 1/6 drop and being like, haha, here's 12 power, and your opponent's like, what are you talking about? I put 35 power over 3 lanes. You're dead. You died 4 minutes ago. Nebula is going to be part of the pendulum swinging back on this, and it's going to be even harder because they're all 1 costs. Like, the problem before was that Maximus was too efficient as part of your turn 6 play because he was 7 power for only 3 energy, and that was like, oh wow, that was so format defining. I don't know if any of you remember that. Like 2 months ago, Maximus was format defining, and now he sees no play. So there's this cyclical nature happening where Nebula is just the new Sunspot. Honestly, there's a kind of a joke / conspiracy going around in my Discord that Nebula is too good, but they're not going to nerf her until the sales taper off, at which point she gets the Shuri treatment. And it's funny to think about, but also probably going to happen. But the point is, I was wrong about how I interpreted Nebula, and I just want to put that out there. A lot of people really liked the last video. I'm glad it gave a lot of people ideas on like how they're going to build decks. All that still has value. None of it's like distinctly wrong. All 3 of those decks work just fine. But the reality is, if you want to build a Nebula deck, build any deck that doesn't have Killmonger, or maybe does, and put Nebula in it. If you would put Sunspot in the deck, you could put Nebula in the deck also, or instead of. That's it. That's the whole takeaway. There's not much to this video. I just wanted to vocalize that. And also, it's been a couple of days since I released one, and I've been playing a lot with Nebula, and I really like her. For what it's worth, I really like the card. I think it's very well designed. Here, okay, we have some more. This is off script, I want you to know. This is just right off the cuff. Oh yeah, you can't even tell. I'm not stalling for time while I think of what to say. So fuck it, now I lost it. So, Nebula is well designed in that she creates very interesting play patterns, emergent play patterns from your opponent. She asks a very interesting question. Has the slight, well, you know, is much worse later. The later you draw her, the worse she is. So that's a huge downside. Even compared to Sunspot, who can be like a 1/5 if you need him to be on turn 6. Like, if that's just what you need to win, it's what you need to win. Like, so be it. Nebula can never do that. But when she comes down early, she creates more interesting and dynamic patterns of play and board states and questions and answers. And so from that perspective, I think she might even be better designed than like Nimrod or Hitmonkey, right? Which create very linear patterns of play. They're not overpowered in the way that Surfer was, but they do create, like, you know, you're doing a thing. Your opponent knows what you're doing. Your opponent, like, has an armor to stop your Nimrod, or like they don't, or they kind of just know how much power is gonna like get spread out into what lanes. Nebula asks a more interesting question, and so I appreciate that about her, and I appreciate those play patterns more. But yeah, she's not, I almost critique that she isn't narrow enough, because I like those kinds of cards more, but that is a more personal preference and less just kind of interacting with the material reality. So I'm gonna stay away from that, but I would almost prefer her be slightly less on the nose, or slightly more on the nose and slightly less genericized, but I don't even know what that would look like. All right, thank you so much. I'm meandering here. Thank you so much. I've been your host, D, also known as MTF Doom. You know, the elucidating, enlightening, enriching, all that. I hope that you have a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow.